Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, William Chow. In today's episode, it's a really first of a series of episodes. I'm going to try to attempt to do something that I've not done before, but I always had the idea of, and that is to do a review on some written work about anime. Okay, so people have been using anime to write essays, to write like theses and documents, and obviously homework assignments and that kind of stuff about anime. And so in this episode is going to be a start of a long chain of episodes, because obviously to fully do an analysis on a written work, it may require me several episodes to go over different points and that kind of stuff. But um, this is one of these sort of rare situations I get to do this. So before I begin and talk about this, I want to remind people to go down below, click like, and click subscribe. Again, any sort of comments and things that you would write down does help the YouTube algorithm. So at least hitting that like definitely does really help. So do please do that. Again, if you want to support me financially, I do have the super thanks button available, as well as the PayPal and Patreon links. Again, I've now added a little more content to the Patreon. So again, if people who are interested in my new ebook that's out, I've now added video versions of that available now. Again, so again, you can go to the Patreon, you can log in for free, and again, I've made it so that any of the paid accounts, has access to that first ebook for free, and the video version, you get a massive discount on it as well. So in case you would like to get a video version of the ebook, okay, as well as the audiobook as well. So do check that out. Link is below. Okay, so as I said, in this episode, I'm going to be going through and doing analysis on these written pieces of work. So people have obviously submitted either thesis documents or maybe their homework assignments, or that's for some of the writing, creative writing, or in this case it's whatever studies that they happen to be doing. Okay, and it uses a lot of references to anime, and part of the reason why I made this this channel is to inform people and to record and document history, of this age of anime that we've had in North America. And a lot of people who are doing this kind of research and that kind of stuff are having problems finding actual sources and actual information in regards to this era of anime. Okay, and and I've seen it from people from Crunchyroll and people from various different magazines and that kind of stuff are all interviewing different people and are trying to find information about the origins of how anime got this way. So in today's episode, I've come across a piece of writing. Okay, it does have this sort of a political sort of type of leaning towards it. Okay, and again, I don't want to talk politics and that kind of stuff, and most people don't really care, especially on this particular part of the channel, because my emphasis is on this again, documenting a time period in our history that that transpired and isn't well documented. Not very many people have written too many articles and that kind of stuff about it, and not too many people, especially from this particular era, have basically documented what exactly has gone on in this thing. And so what ends up happening is people tend to rely on things like Google and whatnot to write their essays and to get confirmation bias on their particular works. And this is particularly poor when Google does not show results for things that happened in the 1990s or the 1980s, right? They actually need some people, some interviews, and that kind of stuff to be made. And that's, primarily one of the main functions of my channel here, is to provide this documentation, to show you pictures, to tell you stories and accounts, show you merchandise and things that came from that, and how we came across it, getting this stuff, what this means, tie in things that happen in anime with things that are happening in real life. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to do with that. So again, this isn't a typical type of episode, and the way that I'm tackling this episode is maybe a little bit strange and very very long. Okay, but I assure you, even though we are touching a little bit on politics, do not pay attention to it too much because I won't delve too deeply into it. Okay, I'll touch on it, but I won't really get into why what particular things that happen on that, because there's a lot of factors and that kind of stuff, and that's not what this particular channel is really about to. But what I want to address, and which is the most important thing, is when people do research, okay, and they go and try to find information that supports their research, okay, and they use Google and that kind of stuff, this is confirmation bias. The fact that you're specifically looking for information and looking for essentially yes men, okay, people that will say yes to whatever you say, to basically confirm what you're writing. And of course, this is really poor scientific method, right? And since the topic is anime, I want to be this person that comes in and says, okay, using my own accounts, my own and whatever evidence and documentations and that kind of stuff, fan letters and newsletters, merchandise, art books, or whatever that happens to be, that I have available as a historic archive. I want to present it to you and tell my story in helping you understand and build this picture, the story. If you want to, kind of have a vision that's not just in front of you but around you, right? What are all the other factors that transcribe around you? So when I describe what the environment of, let's say, an anime convention in 1991, or some of the funny stories and conflicts and cosplay and that kind of stuff that happened at Comic-Con in '89. Okay, I want to not only tell you the story, I want to see if I can get you some pictures. I want to give you some context of why this is this particular thing happened. Was there any other things happening at the con that might have transpired? What about any sort of popular culture things that were also happening, or news stories that was happening at that particular time that has a significance of why this sort of thing occurred in anime? And this is what I want to present. Okay, this is the history part and the accounting part and of course the recording of and documentating of this kind of history, because as I said, um, we're all getting older, okay, and if we don't tell our story, if we don't get it, told in and documented, then we may become people like Carl Masick, Don Yee, Torrance Smith, all these people who are pivotal members of the anime community, but they're no longer around anymore, and they can't tell their story, and and all the things, whether or not good, bad, conflicts, their opinions on stuff, on how they handled things, and all the inside stories that we can't find on Google, and people didn't post on any sort of form, gets lost. Okay, that part of history is lost, and until someone comes through and documents it, maybe brings out some receipts and brings out some scripts or things of basically historical importance, okay, like these anime artifacts, if you will, okay, um, you know their story will never be fully, as I said, fully appreciated and fully understood, and then it'll be just basically left for interpretation. And one good example I just did a few episodes ago is the story of the most mysterious song on the internet. Okay, the mere fact that it is highly possible that most members of the band who wrote that song are no longer around. Even the producer that probably made that thing is probably, maybe, possibly no longer around. And with that, it may be very impossible to find out who exactly wrote that song and where it came from and that kind of stuff. And it may be just one of those untold, basically unsolved mysteries, right? And in this era, at this particular time, there should be no excuse for these untold mysteries or unsolved unresolved and unsolved anime things in history. Because as I said, we are still very, very young. As I said, we have entered a year of 40 years of anime in North America here. We should be able to have and document our own history and be able to do that, because as I said, we're not that old yet. Not that old yet, so let's get that. Okay, so anyway, I apologize for such a long opening. But yes, so here we're going to be in. I'm going to break this up into smaller episodes, and I'm going to kind of spread them out so that it's more digestible, and people can think about and do the different things rather than one big, huge 5-hour, 6-hour long video. Okay, so I'll break it up for you. All right. So without further delay, let's begin.
Alban Wagner, 2014, obviously cited in his book, argues in his own analysis of the forum 9gag. Okay, so basically another a bulletin board forum interface, right? And he's going checking through the different messages on that particular forum. Users are indeed not freed from any cultural, educational, psychological, or social influence, which means that they might sometimes find themselves caught in forms of rampant discrimination, right? So basically what he's saying is that, okay, like anything, like any user for that matter, right? Doesn't matter if your cultural background, your education, your psychological state, or your social influence, okay? So basically, any person that's on that particular user database, right? They were not bound to any sort of cultural thing. So you didn't have to be a particular race type, Japanese, American, white, white, Chinese, Asian, Mexican, whatever. Didn't matter of your education level, right? Because now you have access. It wasn't just university people that have access to it. Now everyday Joe Blow, the plumber, the guy who works at McDonald's, they can now have access to this thing, right? Your psychological state, so you could be bipolar, whatever, on antidepressants, whatever. It doesn't matter what your psychological state happens to be. Stoned, drunk or whatever. Doesn't matter. You can get onto this, right? Or social influence, right? So again, you could be literally nobody. You could be a student at 2014. Okay. This is in the availability area, so could be high school students, could be people from a different country, could be like CCP propagandists, Russian spies, things trying to stir things up, try to cause social divide, things that to invoke hate-related crimes and that kind of stuff, right? All those kind of people are available there. That's what he's basically saying, right? And they might find themselves caught in forms of rampant discrimination. Again, so basically, it gets right back down to the anarchy that rec.arts.anime had before, which is really anybody could post anything about any time. You had anonymity, right? So if you didn't want to use a real name and you want to use a pseudonym, you could do that, and you could spew whatever you wanted to say. Okay, so again, because of what rec.arts.anime, it was a very closed network, right? Because only certain people really had access to it, right? The nodes and the network servers didn't extend too far out of the U.S. Okay, sure, there's a couple of things that that have like .jp and that kind of stuff like that, but because it's so early in the timeline of when computers and that kind of stuff became available, and when they actually started mass producing things like computers and that kind of stuff, only very few highly technical research centers and computing services would have access to internet up to 95, right? So that is extremely restricted to the number of to the amount of users and that kind of stuff that are available. Obviously, education level has to be high. psychological. You're not going to end up with drunk people stoned on weed or whatever. Working at JPL or whatever or something like that, or and social influence. Like sure, you may be rich, lawyer or something like that, but again, you don't really have the need to use a computer. So, for that, that excludes you from that sort of thing. So now, what essentially he's now promoting, and he argues, and I agree with him, is that now, because the internet's open, if you have a news group that has the same anarchy system, bulletin board system, whatever that you've got, 9gag there, which allows everybody now, all the cultural and the entire spectrum is open, okay, and with no hands, no limits, no hands barred, okay, different cultures, different countries, different motives, okay. You're just saying that, hey, it is possible sometimes, right? It's inevitable that people in the group will get caught in forms of rampant discrimination. Like, no duh. It's like, hey, maybe someone from, let's say, the West, says something that offends someone in like, for example, China, okay, who is, shall we say, the East, or or in this sort of situation when we're still doing the Cold War, right? Obviously, someone in the U.S. could say something, and someone in Russia would disagree and say, hey, whatever, and of course, rampant discrimination and arguments and that kind of stuff would occur. So he's really just stating the obvious, really, right? Anyway, so consequently, rec.arts.anime, negative networking practices. So those 7 things that say, oh, we're going to marginalize women because of these, these practices in anime rec.arts, the news group, has created the pre-discourse on what constituted the hegemonic anime fandom in North America and how it interacted with gender-related issues at the expense of the diverse anime fans. Okay, so this is an interesting discourse that's sort of been laid out here, okay, and various assumptions that has occurred here. So consequently, the negative networking practices, so those 7 things that are on that list that she says that people are tending to do to, say that to put down and marginalize women, okay, have created this pre-discourse, so this condition on what constituted what the hegemonic anime fandom in North America. Okay, so it is these practices that happened on this really tiny news group. Okay, this is what controlled and constituted what the anime fandom in North America, is created out of. Okay, and it is this that controlled and interacted with gender-related issues such as females and that kind of stuff being marginalized and that kind of stuff. Okay, at the expense of the gender-diverse anime fans. So, and this is all because of all the rest of the anime fans that including the males and the females and that really tiny little portion of things. So you basically you're trying to say, oh yes, let's not forget that 1% of the population, just so that we talk about the diversity here. Okay. Again, word salad. Okay, this is a ridiculous statement to make, and the reason why is okay. So, consummate anime anime. So again, 1995 and further back, okay? Especially if you're even going back to 1987. But of course, since you didn't take any messages from before 1992, or yes, then that's a pretty narrow thing. So let's just concentrate on 92 to 95, okay? So again, you're saying that what this very narrow population in that community, okay, has done is what has created this whole entire anime fandom in North America, and that their ideology from this tiny sliver of people that have access, very specialized people that have access to this news group, has influenced how anime fandom is all over North America, and this is how how they deal with gender related issues, i.e., like women. Okay, the 7 negative impacts of women on gender issues at the expense, of everybody else. Right? They cause this big problem for every other fan in North America. Okay. And that's a pretty bold statement to say. Okay. What you're saying is these people that are on this news group have so much influence and so much power that they influence the decision of everybody else that's out there. Okay. And then the question becomes, how? If you were a person that did not have access to this news group or that kind of stuff, how do you have influence on them? Okay, and that becomes then you have to be the ground zero, right? You have to have you have to be that person or that as you refer to as spreadable media, right? You have to spread this message, okay, to these people that don't have access to this thing. So how does your message, okay, this internet, posting that you have on this very specialized news group, how do you get that out of the internet into the real world and into all these other anime fans? You can't. Social media does not exist, right? The model that you have, which is that the mimic logic, as you refer to it, okay, sits at ground zero and remains at ground zero. There are no ones, okay. You don't spread anything outside of your system. This is the equivalent of isolating a virus, okay. So when a person is diagnosed with, let's say, the Black Plague or something, or anthrax or something, or whatever, right? The person's going to get put into an isolation chamber at the hospital, so therefore, nobody else can get affected by that person, right? Because his media, spreadable media, the virus, okay, cannot spread outside of that room, okay? And that's exactly what we have here. The internet, as very narrow as it is, okay, sure, it has all these messages and that kind of stuff. How do you get those messages out of this internet to people who don't have internet? You can't. Okay. What is the people going to do? They're going to print it out on a printer, or what? Put it on a floppy diskette. Okay. Then what? You got all those people in CFO Denver over there, okay, across the country. How are you going to get that photocopied piece of paper over all the way to them? You're going to have to mail it, right? So here's your problem. You see, before all this, before they made this news group, okay, and before, and for the most part, when I didn't have access to these internet news groups and that kind of stuff, we had to rely on mail. Okay, the postal system, paper, writing letters, fan letters. Okay, very specific one-on-one conversations and one-on-one talking with other people. We spread, our words and that kind of stuff through subscriptions to these anime fan clubs. I described it in the previous episode. How did I get knowledge of all the different things? How did I, spread my word, spread the word, right? I did exactly that. I got in touch with my most closest anime fan club. That's part of the CFO, which is the CFO Victoria. I paid a membership fee. I joined them. Okay, they gave me all the addresses of all the other CFO chapters. Denver, New York, San Jose, San Diego, Berkeley University, and all over the place. Okay, Rutgers is another major hub. Okay, big huge thing. I sent a letter to every single one of those people. Okay, and some of them mailed me back letters and mailed me responses and that kind of stuff. And then I started mailing them back and forth. Sure, it took weeks, maybe even months to get replies, but I got them, and I didn't have to use this internet thing. Right? I operated almost 2 to 3 years before, but using mail as opposed to using this internet thing. Okay, so what you're saying is that this negative network perhaps somehow instituted itself and controlled it is absolutely wrong, because as I said, if you can't export the media as you defined, okay, the spreadable media, if you can't get that out in any tangible form, that media lives and dies in that space, that cubicle, that box that you just put it into. Okay, it will not get out of there and will not survive and will not spread because you can't get it out of that box. Right, and that's exactly what happens with news groups, because it is a push system. Right, you write a message, it gets pushed to the next internet node, and basically, and then it's stored in that particular node. But each of those nodes, okay, even though it might be located all across the United States, it's still inside this thing called the internet or the intranet or whatever that they have at that particular time. It's still trapped in these news groups, okay? And unless there is a way to transport and bridge those news groups to something out in the real world, it will live and die inside that in that news group, in that box. Okay, it has no influence, no negative networking practices, as you say. They're all trapped inside this box. Okay. Meanwhile, on the outside, okay, we're happily, writing letters to each other, handwritten letters. A lot of people, and I've shown examples on my page of some of the nicest handwriting. As I said, Cindy was one of the first people that I got in contact with in CFO Denver. Nicest person ever, right? She was really interested in a whole bunch of different animes. She even drew a huge picture of Camille from Zeta Gundam, just the same way how I drew a huge picture of Minmay for my room. I mean, really, the epitome of a female otaku. But no, there was no negative networking practices. There was no, putting down and hiding her issues and that kind of stuff. She was one of the most approachable people and one of the nicest people out there. And bright. She went in for a double major at the Colorado University. Okay, and so I said, perfectly fine. And that's how I probably have to argue that was probably the general experience of most anime, female anime fans at the time. Okay, they weren't, subjugated to, negative networking and practices and that kind of stuff in real life. Because as I said, what you've done is you've taken, shall we say, bad practices that happens in a box and trying to extrapolate what that happens in that box to the real world without a path, okay, even goes against what you refer to as spreadable media, okay, because it's not spreadable. It's trapped in this box and will not spread. So by that means, it totally debunks this entire section that they talk about. Again, because of technological means.
Thank you for sticking along and basically staying with it for this long. I really appreciate that. I said again, this is not typical content that I like, that I like to to do, and but I think it's very interesting. Not so much for the the topic or whatever of the particular essay here, okay? Because I don't that's probably that's politics and that kind of stuff is something I don't want to get into on this particular channel. But again, the importance of is correctly documenting events that happened in the past, especially in this very important golden era part of anime, and making and setting the record straight. You can make your own interpretations, and as when I remember when I took when I was on jury duty, okay, someone made a very prolific statement, okay, which really shaped the way how I think and interpret things. And this is what he said. You can choose to not believe, partially believe, total believe, none, some, or all of the evidence. Okay? So think about that. You can either, and this is it. There's, you've provided 6 different possibilities for one particular type of outcome. So if someone presents you a piece of information, you can choose to 0% believe none of it. Okay, like you have no confidence in it. You can have some belief or some particular confidence of some level, or you can be totally invested in believing this thing. Okay, but also you can also choose to believe none of the evidence. So, if multiple pieces or one piece of evidence that has different facets of it, you can choose to believe none of that. Maybe some parts of the evidence you deem credible and you will believe some parts of that. Or you trust the evidence, okay, so you fully believe that this evidence is 100% all parts of the evidence, so all the evidence as a whole, and you can choose to believe none of it, some of it, or all of it. And you can choose what level you believe it to, whether or not you just decide to 100% with or 0% confidence in any parts of that, partial confidence in 0 to all of it, or 100% confidence in none or all of it. Okay? Seems kind of confusing, but at the same time, it really resonated with me about how you would learn to interpret things and take the parts that you want to, that you feel credible, okay, and then you can analyze that using critical thinking to determine whether or not you wish to add this to your base of knowledge or disregard it as just total fluff. Or maybe something in the middle. Partially you agree with certain parts, you don't agree with certain parts, you feel fuzzy about certain parts, but you're confident that the evidence is actually true, but you're not really sure. Well, that's so it handles all the different gray zones, both positively on that. So again,
the goal here is to train your mind how to see the world differently, how to question what others say. I've come to realize that there are 3 categories of truth: personal truth, political truths, and the objective truths that shape our understanding of the universe. The interesting thing about an objective truth is that it's true no matter what. Imagine that.
That's just something one story I like to reflect on. But again, we have more episodes of this. This is a fairly long essay, but as I said, I'll split up the episodes and have more of that again. Okay, so thank you for staying this long. But again, don't be turned off by the fact of the topic that this is about. Because I'm not going to try to cover the politics and that kind of stuff a little bit. I'll touch on it a little bit just because I have to. But for the most part, I want to stick to the history. All right. So thank you again, and I will see you in the next episode. So until then, Until next time, I will see you again.